I have here with me the Alpha A7 Mark II. There's quite a few changes from the original A7, so I'm just going to give you a guided tour of this camera before I show you what this camera is capable of. I'll just move this over to the side here, and we can quite quickly see that the two doors, instead of one being above another, now are side by side. Okay, and inside there we have the audio in and out ports, and alongside that in the door next door, we have the HDMI port and also the Sony multi-port. Okay, now one of the reasons is that this has probably moved position is because of the Sony Steadyshot that is pretty much inside and taking up some of this capacity in the lower right hand corner of this camera. Okay, let's just flip the camera out onto its back here. The LCD is a higher resolution LCD, and if I just flip it out for you, you'll see that it actually extends further out than it has before. This gives us a good clearance from the EVF looking down onto the camera, so it's no longer obscured by that EVF coming into the top portion of that viewfinder, and that's a really nice feature for people who are going to be shooting from the waist, and also perhaps video shooters. Okay, we're moving around. You'll notice that the little trash can is now called C4. That's the custom 4 button, and that gives you an idea that we've added one more custom button to this interface to make the camera even more customizable than ever before. You'll also notice that Sony have disabled the ISO on the spin wheel, okay, and assigned it to the right button where the white balance used to be. Okay, the down button is still unassigned, so you could assign that to white balance. By default, I think this camera, one of the new custom buttons on the top of the camera, is now assigned to white balance. We'll also notice that the SD card slot, the cards are coming in from the side, which is just a minor change there. If we flip the camera over onto the base, you'll see that we've got quite a large and new grip on this side. Standard battery, pretty much the same battery that's been running through the NEX and E-mount lineup since day one. Okay, if we flip the camera onto the side, you'll see the movie record button is in a familiar position, and we can now really get an idea of how much larger that grip is, giving us a much more comfortable grip, especially when using larger lenses. If I move the camera onto the top, we can see that the Steadyshot inside. Okay, and obviously that is the primary new feature of the Alpha 7 Mark II, which really sets this camera apart now from the A7R, the megapixel king, and the A7S, which is the low light king. Okay, the mode dial is pretty much unchanged, and the exposure compensation, now you can see the familiar custom 1 is now joined with a custom 2 just alongside. What's happening is, because we've got this much larger grip here, is the shutter release is moving forward onto this grip, and we have the front control wheel now on the front of that grip. Okay, now this is probably a much more familiar holding position for people coming straight from DSLRs, although most A7 users have got used to the layout of the A7R, A7S and the original A7 cameras here. Okay, so again, just looking at familiar NFC connections, the IR, and if I just remove this lens from here, we actually now have the A7S mount added to the A7 Mark II. This is a superior lens mount, and you'll notice this as soon as you start putting the lenses on the camera. You'll notice that the machine tolerances are that much more tighter, as we've got to have a little bit of a firmer twist to get that lens locked onto the camera. Okay, now if I just show you the holding position of this camera, you can see that the shutter finger now is further forward than it has been, and quite comfortably we can access both the rear and front dials. C1, a little bit of a reach over to the C2, but that's okay, that's manageable, and the center button at the back. Okay, I've attached a Nikkor 180 f2.8 lens onto this camera. It doesn't have any sort of vibration reduction or image stabilization. And if I was using a lens or a non-native lens on this camera, I would actually switch that image stabilization off. Okay, now you can see this camera's not on a tripod, as you can probably see from the shake in my hands. I do have my elbow rested on a knee, so I'm trying to get it as steady as I possibly can. Okay, but you can see the problems here. And if I come to zoom in to get critical focus, obviously it's a little bit tricky to find the sharp focus when that camera is bouncing around in the viewfinder there. So I'll just come back out into full frame view. I've assigned some of the new features of this image stabilization or Steadyshot onto my function menu. So I'll just come in and I'll switch that into the on position. Okay, and already you can see that it looks like now the camera is mounted on a tripod. Everything is settled down beautifully there. If I go back to that function menu, I've actually specified the focal length of this lens because it's non-native. The Sony camera doesn't actually understand the lens it's using, so we basically tell the camera that we're using a 180mm focal length lens. Okay, so and if I obviously come back in and want to zoom in there, I can zoom in, and obviously you can see now that it's a lot easier in order to gain critical focus when the camera or any object, it could be a piece of wildlife inside this frame, is obviously very still. And obviously as I'm recording the movie, we're going to get some Steadicam pretty much without using an external Steadicam feature there. Okay, so that's one of the great things about this new image stabilization or Steadyshot inside of the A7 Mark II.